Okay. Hi, Linwood. How are you?
Very good, very good.
Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
I definitely appreciate you having me.
So, why don't you just tell us a little about yourself first, and then we'll talk about your writings. All right? You just
Yep.
introduce yourself to people. Okay.
I write about inward and devotional health from the perspective of the Bible, and I know that that's kind of vague, but the philosophy within the Bible, when you get down into it and dissect it, it's more of a inward regeneration and a religious or philosophical or doctrinal reformation. So you're regenerating who you are inwardly, and while doing that, your devotional outlook is also changing, and that means how you're operating as a human being in a community, and as a human being at home, and as a human being personally with inwardly. So most of my books, or basically all of my books, they deal with that subject of personal devotional reform and regeneration, or mental refreshing. And I do it creatively in a way. Like, for example, my most recent book is a book of poetry entitled Growth. And in this book, I dedicate each poem to one point in my life. The book is a 9-year journey of me putting into practice the counsels that are in the Bible. So just creatively illustrating those critical moments to show the reader or my listener that what I'm going through, we're all going through the same thing, but there's a way that we can get better mentally and inwardly.
Okay, that's a lot of information. Let me try to find something in there. So, you're suggesting that the Bible is a way for people to find their inner self, find their inner peace, if you will.
I am, and it's awfully conflicting because the Christian religion in and of itself doesn't really teach that. So there's a conflict there because there's more of a you put your hope and your desire on a specific individual religious figure in the Christian religion. The philosophy that is within the Bible, it's not so much that you dedicate yourself to an individual figure. The dedication of that figure is for you to get the figure within yourself aligned with you, the people that are around you, and also the destination that that philosophy is leading you into. So there's a bit of a conflict, which has to do with a lot of traditional understanding from Christian philosophers that have built up the foundation of that specific, landscape of information, which the Bible doesn't really support. It doesn't support what is in that landscape. That landscape it went in its own direction, and that's another one of my books called "A Fallen Record: The Christian Transgression," which is a history from within the Bible showing how the Christian religion backtracked from teaching what the Bible actually teaches to creating a new religion of its own.
What do you think happened? Do you think people got a hold of it and misinterpreted it or used it for their own personal gains without teaching the word to everyone else? In other words, they're using it as a control mechanism for people. Do you think that's what happened?
It is a control mechanism. I would say secondarily, primarily it's due to the fact of the the Roman Jews inculcating the Roman religion into the Jewish religion and misinterpreting what those first apostles, Peter, Paul, John, that were located in Jerusalem, the church that was in Jerusalem, they misinterpreted or willingly misinterpreted what the first apostles taught based on their pagan Roman understanding of that pagan Roman religion from the Jewish perspective. It got combined with what the apostles actually taught, and that, you know, grounded religion, that grounded pagan religion of the Romans, it got transformed into what we today know as Christianity, which Constantine is the one that coined Christianity to be Christianity, as he had to decide which take on, and everything that really got translated from the Roman religion into the Christian religion was what was cemented in Nicaea by Constantine. What fell off was doctrinally the first apostles taught that the illustration of the man suspended between heaven and earth, crucified, they actually taught is what the Bible teaches in the writings of Paul and Peter is that the body suspended on the cross isn't supposed to be looked at as a human being. It's supposed to be looked at as a religious philosophy. That's how that's how the first apostles taught it. And so the crucifixion of the body really means a crucifixion of a certain religious philosophy that has been held on traditionally by pagan religions and also the Jewish religion. The the Christian ministers that they originally began as Jewish ministers. They took on the name Christian because they began to idolize a certain figure that they believed was associated to the movement that the apostles were teaching about. And the figure was not associated with what the apostles taught. It was a figure that was traditionally translated into the Christian religion from the Roman religion. So even in the book of, First and Second Timothy, Paul is telling Christian ministers, remember that this person is who taught this person is who taught that, because there was a new, quote unquote, as Paul says in the Corinthians and also in the book of Galatians, there was a new Jesus that Christian Jewish ministers were talking about, and it wasn't anything connected to what the apostles were teaching. So at that early time, even while the apostles were alive, there was a conflict between these two camps.
Okay. My takeaway from everything you've just said is that at some point, although Jesus Christ was a real person who was here,
Yes. Yeah.
the idea or the teachings of the Bible was more that he was more of a concept rather than the physical person. Like he was beyond that. So the idea was the teachings were to emulate Jesus rather than worship Jesus as a man. Is that correct?
And
Is that what you're saying?
that's exactly what I'm saying. And that's exactly what the man himself said. You go, even in the book of John, if a man love me, he will keep my words, just for example. So what really happened was the concept, just as you said it perfectly. Language and context in the Bible, the authors, they're not writing from a Western perspective like you and I, or like you and your audiences are familiar with. The Western perspective is individual, it's singular, it's physical,
Right.
it's,
Yeah.
but the Bible's written from an Eastern mind. And when the Eastern mind is speaking, the Eastern mind is not individual. For example, I am the light of the world is something that the man also said, or I am the way, the truth, and the life. In the original language, this I isn't individualistic, and it's not talking about the individual person. The I is in reference to the words that are coming out of the man's mouth. So there was a real man, and the real man taught a doctrine, but the doctrine that the man taught was not to worship him.
How did you get to this point with the Bible? I mean, how did you figure
Yeah.
this out? What was
It
your
it
epiphany?
yeah. It began years ago from my journey of understanding the definition of love, going through certain things in life and understanding, well, what I went through landed me in the hospital, and I needed to understand how come I had no definition of love within myself, and how come this wasn't taught to me. And so I went and just researched different philosophies that were out there, and none of them really clicked. They didn't really make sense. And religion in and of itself just doesn't click when you're looking for you. You don't, religion kind of takes you away from you, and makes you place all of your anxiety on some kind of ideal. And that's not what I wanted. I didn't want to deceive myself. I wanted to correct myself. And so I wasn't really raised in a religious household, but I was always taught that there is an I watching and a mind knowing. And going through what I went through, I picked up the Bible, and just to see what was in it, and just to see if the counsels were good for my physical body as along with my mental. And I did find that the diet that went along with the mental also corrected the physical. And that experience became my first book, Perfecting and Reforming Personal Religion. And this is when I realized that the language that is in the Bible, it's really not the language that is traditionally taught in the seminaries to pastors that we listen to. What's really taught in seminaries has really nothing to do with what is in the Bible. And so the more that I began to understand the benefit of the words, the more I began to pry even more. Like, if this is really, if the words are really as powerful as they are from my mind, and I'm applying them to my body, and I'm seeing a real change in health and a liveliness to my mind cognitively, then something has to be deeper than this. And that's when I began to look at the original language, translating the English into Greek and Hebrew, and forming, the sentences, and then retranslating those sentences back into English from Greek and Hebrew. And
Wow.
when I did that, I began to learn the context of the words that were being spoken, and I began to see how the Christian religion doesn't really embellish, but kind of omits a lot while embellishing what was really spoken. And that's when you see the different concepts that the Bible teaches, the fact that there was an actual man that did teach a specific philosophy, and he was crucified because of that revolutionary thought, and that this individual is not the figure that the Christian religion teaches. And then from there, there's a history of how did the Christian religion get to this one character. And then you see the transitioning of different similar characters from different other religions that now are in the Christian religion. So then you weigh that with what the Bible actually teaches, and the philosophies are quite different in the goals of them. They're quite, left and right.
There's really no need for a church if you get to that point, right, of understanding. The church becomes sort of useless.
In a sense, it depends, because when you have a group of individuals that are informed on the language and the context, then the community feel and the community aspect can be accomplished with a with more precision, as opposed to church now being a place where you can either showboat with your clothes, or you can go and sit down and listen to someone who you perceive is enlightened, who really does not, as I'm learning or as I've been told, are not fully believing what they're teaching, because what they're teaching in the seminary isn't really what they know is to be true, and what they're reading within the Bible is actually about. So, in a sense, the Bible is not written for church, and that may
Right.
be hard to hear, but the Bible is written for the church within, so that what is within can then benefit what is without, and what we do without can be a physical church, but within, what is within has to first come to that realization.
I think you brought up a good point about the church and community,
Yeah,
because the physical building, the people getting together,
yeah,
um, and with the Protestant churches, particularly in the United States, I grew up in that kind of an environment. My grandfather went every Sunday, and when I was a little kid, I was taken. But it was more of just, it was like a social gathering more than
yeah,
anything else.
exactly.
And everybody got together, and then after church, they all had potluck lunch, and everybody sat around and ate. And, it was just like that's what you did on Sunday. So I can see where the benefit is for that. But when you start digging into the real kind of hardcore
Yeah,
meanings of it, yeah, you're right. I think it's something you have to find within yourself, yeah? That did
that's
anyone influence you at all, or did you do this all on your own?
no, I had no influence. The only influence that I had was really myself. I think that the when you can see yourself in a tragic state, it makes you anxious. And when you can realize in that state that no one around you has anything that can benefit you, to help you, you become even more anxious. And then that's when you start to pull information from out of nowhere. And me pulling information from out of nowhere really didn't do anything for me. So I had to, go back and to realize, what, I've been raised in this way. I haven't been brought up in it. Let me just see what it actually is. And I went into it. I found health for my mind and also for my body. And I found also that it's really not exactly what everybody else has been saying. And that has been my motivation to speak publicly. There's a lot of people that are sitting in churches and they're waiting for the pastors to say something that's going to make them go, yes, finally I'm here and I believe everything I'm supposed to believe. But that's really not how it goes. They're not going to hear anything special from a pastor. They're not going to catch anything from some kind of, something that they believe is beneficial. It takes putting the words in the book into practice, whether we believe those words are contradictory, because on the surface they are contradictory, but in reality they're not contradictory. So going through that experience of what you believe is contradictory and feeling the loss of not knowing what those words mean, to gaining an understanding from the experience to know what those words mean, and then to just repeat the cycle to gain a better understanding for wisdom to live by through those words that you can then develop as your own and cultivate and live by. So that's the main goal within the Bible. It's a philosophy of not simply of self, but of being, of being, so that the self can understand how it needs to live in this world, personally, family, economically, industrially, in all sorts of facets.
I think on that note, we're going to have to wrap it up. Unfortunately, we are out of time. What is the title of your book again?
My most recent book, if you want to read the experience that we've been speaking about, it's called Growth. That's my most recent book of poetry, Growth. But the main book that we've been discussing is Perfecting and Reforming Personal Religion.
Okay, and give us your website.
My website, it's my name, linwoodjacksonjr.com, BILIN, linwoodjacksonjr.com.
Linwood, thanks so much for coming on. This was fascinating. I know we could have went on for a long time. We've got to have